They locked an alien girl in the basement to eat alone, until one human smashed the door open. The main mess hall of the Galactic Coalition flagship Nexus sounded like organized chaos. Voices of dozens of species overlapped, deep rumbles, musical trills, clicking consonants, blending with the clatter of utensils and the hum of the ship's life support systems. Food dispensers along one wall, extruded meals tailored to 27 different biologies. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. 27, that is, everywhere except during meal times. Then, for one cadet, the number dropped to 26. At the edge of the cafeteria, a plain utility door stayed firmly shut. Behind it, a narrow stairwell led down to a storage-level room that had been repurposed into a private dining space. Mila sat alone at a metal table in that windowless basement, a tray of untouched nutrient gel in front of her. The low light caught the facets of her crystalline blue skin, scattering fractured rainbows across the bare walls. At 16 stellar cycles, she was the youngest Luminar aboard the Nexus and the only one accepted into the junior officer program. Her translator implant pulsed softly against her temple as it stayed synced with her thoughts, ready to catch any spoken word and convert it into Coalition standard. It was one more piece of technology reminding her she was far from home. Her stomach announced its own protest, a thin chiming sound that tinkled through the empty room like someone flicking glass with a fingernail. She eyed the nutrient paste, specially formulated for Luminar physiology. It had cooled into a dull, jelly-like mound. Temperature didn't really matter. Her body could extract nutrients at any heat level. Warm just felt kinder. No one had asked her preference. They called it dietary incompatibility. They said it was cultural sensitivity. They framed it as being for your comfort and privacy, Cadet Xerex. None of those phrases changed the fact that the door at the top of the stairs locked from the outside. Technically, no officer had ever said the words, "You are forbidden to eat in the main cafeteria." But the escort out, the polite insistence, the click of the lock every meal period, those were loud enough. Luminars ate by absorbing nutrients through their outer layer. To do that efficiently, they partially liquefied their crystal-like epidermis. To many other species, that process was unsettling. At least, that's what the administrators had implied in careful, diplomatic language. So instead of eating among the other cadets, Mila sat here, cycle after cycle, alone with her thoughts and her cold food. She exhaled slowly, a habit she'd picked up from humans since actual breathing was optional for her kind. She held her hand over the bowl. Her outer layer began to soften and turn translucent. The solid blue facets melted into a semi-liquid state, shimmering like thick gel. Droplets formed and slid toward her palm, ready to draw nutrients up into her body. A deafening crash shattered the silence. Mila jerked, snatching her hand back. The sound echoed in the small room. She spun toward the stairwell, just in time to see the basement door above burst inward. One hinge ripped straight out of the frame. The panel hung crookedly, rocking on the remaining hinge. In the opening stood a human male cadet, chest heaving, face flushed deep red. His dark hair was much like he'd sprinted the whole length of the ship. Mila recognized him instantly. Tyler Grant, another junior trainee. She'd seen him in orientation and in a few shared lectures, usually surrounded by other humans, laughing too loudly. "What is this?" he demanded, voice booming against the concrete. "Is this where they've been making you eat?" Her translator caught every syllable, but it had trouble flattening the emotional punch in his tone. She'd read about humans in her xenobiology lectures. Rapidly adaptable, emotionally intense, relatively new to the Coalition. What the textbooks hadn't bothered to mention was volume. "It is acceptable," Mila answered, her natural harmonics translated into smooth standard. Her voice sounded like wind moving through a glass forest. "I do not object." "You don't," he cut himself off, raking a hand through his hair. No, this isn't acceptable. This is segregation." The word landed hard, even through the translator filter. Mila tilted her head, refracting the thin light through her crest in a pattern that would have signaled confusion to another Luminar. The Administrative Council determined that my feeding process could cause discomfort among other species. This arrangement was presented as mutual benefit. Did you agree to it? Tyler asked, stepping fully into the room and letting the wrecked door swing behind him. Or did they agree on your behalf? She opened her mouth, then found no words came out. There was a tightness in her throat cavity, a constriction she'd never felt before. Her people's language had harmonics for thousands of concepts, but none for this mix of shame and doubt. Tyler dragged the other chair out and dropped into it like he had every right to be there. I've seen you vanish during every meal period since orientation, he said, lowering his voice a little. Today I followed Vice Principal Draft. Watch him walk you out and then lock the door behind you. It is standard procedure, she insisted softly. For my privacy. Privacy doesn't require a lock on the outside, he shot back. That's not privacy. That's a holding cell. I'm not a prisoner, she said. The protest sounded thin even to her own ears. I know you're not. His expression softened, anger focusing into something sharper. But what they're doing is wrong. Where I come from, we have an ugly history of separate for your own good. It never actually is for your good. Warmth spread through her core, not from food, but from the intensity of his conviction. It was strange and unsettling and oddly comforting all at once. What would you have me do? She asked. The decision has already been filed and recorded. Decisions can be reversed, Tyler replied, especially ones that break the Coalition Charter. He quoted it like he was reciting lyrics. No sentient being shall be isolated or segregated on the basis of biology, appearance, or function. You have memorized the charter? Her crest pulsed in surprise. Chunks of it, he admitted with a small shrug. My dad's a civil rights lawyer planetside. You pick things up. He nodded toward her tray. Your food's cold. Come upstairs with me. We'll get you a fresh serving. In the actual cafeteria, where you belong. The suggestion sent a spike of panic through her system. Her outer layer hardened reflexively, crystal facets snapping back into place like armor. I cannot. My feeding process will disturb them. Then they'll learn to deal with it. Tyler stood and held out his hand, palm up. Isn't that literally the point of a Galactic Coalition academy? Learning to live with species that aren't like you. Mila stared at the offered human hand. 5 flexible digits, soft skin, fine lines, faint calluses. Different in almost every way from her own luminous structure. Slowly, she placed her cool, crystalline fingers into his. Contact triggered a flood of sensory data, heat, texture, subtle electrical impulses. Her translator murmured in the background, trying to tag emotional context for her records. Very well, she said quietly, rising. But if an incident occurs... If there's an incident, Tyler said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze, we handle it together. The translator rendered together as collective engagement, but it felt too clinical for the sensation that words stirred in her. On Luminar Prime, unity meant a planetary resonance network of shared thought and energy. This human version sounded smaller and more personal, anchored in 2 people instead of billions. As they climbed the stairs, Mila's anxiety climbed with them. By the time they reached the cafeteria level, her outer shell had hardened and split into sharp facets that threw hostile points of light across the metal walls. Her bioluminescence flickered unevenly, betraying every spike of fear. Tyler paused with his hand on the cafeteria door. You don't have to do this, he said softly. We can walk away. But I promise you this. Not everyone up there agrees with hiding you. You're not disturbed by my feeding method? She asked. I haven't even seen it yet, he pointed out. I'm just curious. If you feel like sharing it. Mila drew in a pretend breath, the way humans did before stress. Proceed, she said. Tyler shoved the door open. Noise and color rushed in. The cafeteria was crowded. Archerans with their mobile eye stalks, feather-crested Forians, heavy-bodied Valyrians, sleek Phalasians, and more. Food scents mingled in odd combinations. For a few seconds, no one noticed the Luminar stepping through the doorway with the human at her side. Then the nearest table fell silent. Someone's utensil clinked against a plate. Conversations faltered. Heads and eye stalks turned. Vice Principal Drav, A towering Valyrian with mottled green skin and 4 muscular arms was the first to move. He shoved back his chair and rose from the staff table, all 6 of his eyes widening. "Cadet Grant," he barked, his voice rolling like thunder. "Cadet Xerex is not permitted in the primary mess during feeding cycles. You will escort her back to her assigned space immediately." Tyler shifted subtly, angling his body between Mila and Drav. "With respect, sir," he said, "there's no academy regulation that bans any cadet from this room. There are special considerations in Cadet Xerex's case." Drav snapped, lower arms crossing over his broad chest. "Her situation requires accommodation." "Her situation?" Tyler echoed. "You mean her species?" "Because isolating a cadet based on species characteristics is exactly what the Charter forbids." "I'm well aware of the Charter," Drav growled. "This arrangement exists for Cadet Xerex's comfort and privacy." "Maybe we should ask her," came a calm voice from the far end of the hall. An elderly Phalasian with silver scales and thoughtful eyes approached, moving with unhurried grace. Principal Lurik's presence did something even a red alert couldn't. It shut the room up. "Cadet Xerex," Lurik said, stopping in front of them. "Tell me honestly, is this basement dining arrangement your preference?" Mila felt dozens of eyes on her like stars pressing in. Her skin pulsed with nervous light. She glanced sideways at Tyler. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. "No, Principal," she said at last, voice ringing clear. "I would rather eat with my cohort, but I was told my method of nutrient absorption might offend." "I see," Lurik murmured. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the silent room. "Has anyone here actually seen a Luminar eat?" Silence spread outward like a wave. Not one voice replied. "As I suspected," Lurik said. His thin mouth curled into what her translator tagged as a smile. "On a species, it looked like a careful baring of teeth. We appear to have built a policy on fear and assumption instead of knowledge. A poor example for an academy that claims to teach interspecies understanding." He gestured toward an empty table near the center. "Cadet Xerex, you may sit wherever you wish. That applies to all cadets, regardless of biology." Drav's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. One sharp look from Lurik was enough. "If you are willing," Lurik added more gently, turning back to Mila, "I would suggest something else. Ignorance thrives in shadows. Perhaps demonstrating your feeding process, with explanation, would help your classmates understand instead of fear." The thought of becoming a live demonstration made Mila's inner lattice tremble. Her first instinct was to refuse. Then Tyler's fingers brushed hers, grounding her. "If you're okay with it," he said quietly, "I think it could really help." Mila felt the eyes again, curious, yes, but not all hostile. Some glowed with genuine interest. "I can demonstrate," she said. They crossed to the indicated table. Whispers followed them like a trailing current. Tyler deposited her at the seat facing the room, then jogged to the dispensers, returning with a steaming bowl of fresh blue-green nutrient gel. "Chef's special," he said with an exaggerated bow, which drew a few scattered laughs from nearby tables. Despite everything, Mila's crest rippled in an amused pattern. She looked around. Principal Lurik stood a few meters away with several instructors. Cadets of every shape and size clustered at a respectful distance, leaving a wide circle around her table. "If everyone can observe," she began, forcing her voice to carry, "I will explain." She lifted her hand above the bowl, so the rising steam brushed her skin. "Luminars lack an internal digestive tract," she said. "We absorb nutrients through our outer layer. To do this efficiently, we induce controlled liquefaction of our crystalline epidermis." Slowly, deliberately, she let her hand soften. The facets blurred, edges dissolving into a smooth, jelly-like translucence. It spread from fingertips to wrist, solid crystal melting into a shimmering fluid that still held its shape. Clusters of cadets gasped. Mila braced for flinches of disgust. "Does it hurt?" A young Furian blurted instead, her feathered crest puffing with fascination. "No pain," Mila replied, relaxing a fraction. "It is as natural to us as..." She searched for something, anything they'd relate to. as blinking is to you, or salivating when you sense food. Encouraged by their reactions, she lowered her liquefied hand until it touched the surface of the gel. Blue and green swirled where they met. The nutrient paste began to creep upward, drawn in her soft, fluid skin like water wicking up paper. The nutrients pass through my outer membrane and distribute through my internal lattice, she explained. Indigestible material remains behind. The room stayed nearly silent, save for the faint hum of the ship. Students leaned forward. Some recorded with datapads. Others just stared wide-eyed. The gel slowly vanished from the bowl, absorbed into her body. When only a thin ring of clear residue remained, she lifted her hand again. The liquefied portion began to harden, crystals rebuilding from wrist to fingertip until her hand looked solid once more. And that is the process, she said, flexing her fingers. For one breathless second, there was nothing. Then Tyler started clapping. The sound caught, moving from table to table. Within moments, the entire cafeteria was applauding. An arrow to any cadet's bioluminescent spots blazed bright as she called out, "It's beautiful, like living sculpture." A Mina researcher was scribbling notes furiously. "Extremely efficient nutrient transfer," he murmured. "Much less waste than typical ingestion." Compliments and questions washed in from all sides. Not one voice expressed disgust. Not one asked for her to be removed. Principal Lurick lifted his hands for quiet. "This," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "is the true purpose of our academy and the coalition itself. Not to hide away what we do not understand, but to meet it, learn from it, and honor it. We owe Cadet Xerex our thanks and an apology." He glanced at Vice Principal Drav, whose mottled skin darkened in embarrassment. On behalf of the administration, Drav said stiffly, "I admit our previous policy regarding your meals was an error. Cadet Xerex, I formally apologize for the isolation you have experienced. The arrangement is rescinded, effective immediately." Mila felt herself flare with light, her entire body going faintly translucent in the Luminar equivalent of a blush. "Apology accepted," she managed. Tyler slid into the seat beside her and grinned. "So," he said, lifting his own tray with its untidy stack of earth food, "mind if I eat with you? I promise my method is much less elegant." "I would appreciate the company," Mila replied. She watched as he started tearing into a sandwich with what looked like deliberate chaos, ripping, chewing, swallowing. From her perspective, it was wildly inefficient and oddly messy, but the easy normalcy of it soothed her. Other cadets drifted closer, asking if they could sit with them, if they could ask more about Luminar culture, about crystal cities and resonance networks. For the first time since she'd stepped onto the Nexus, Mila didn't feel like a problem to be hidden. She felt seen. She felt included. Later, as the crowd thinned and the meal cycle wound down, Tyler walked beside her toward the corridor junction. "I told you it wouldn't be as bad as you feared," he said. "You also predicted there would be an incident," she reminded him. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck with a sheepish smile. "But this was the good kind." She hesitated, then lightly placed her fingers on his forearm. "Thank you for breaking that door." He shrugged. "I'll probably get demerits for it." "Was it worth the discipline risk?" she asked. "We barely know each other." He slowed, considering. "Because it was wrong," he said simply, "and when something is wrong, someone has to do something. That's what my parents hammered into me back on Earth." "Is that a common human belief?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Not as common as it should be," Tyler said wryly. "But it's very human to shove ourselves into situations that aren't our business when injustice is involved." "An admirable flaw," Mila said. "Depend who you ask." He grinned. "See you at dinner tomorrow?" "I will be there," she promised. As he walked away, Mila felt something shift inside her, like the realignment of crystalline bonds during a growth cycle. A door had opened, literally and metaphorically, and nothing would be quite the same again. 2 weeks later, the Nexus felt like a different ship to Mila. She still drew attention in the cafeteria, but it had changed flavor. Instead of uneasy glances, she got polite questions and enthusiastic curiosity. Instead of a locked basement, She got invitations to join study groups and casual chatter about exams. Luminars naturally preferred quiet and contemplation. The sudden surge of social interaction sometimes overwhelmed her. Whenever it did, Tyler seemed to sense it. He'd crack a joke, redirect a crowd, or simply plant himself at her side until things calmed. The novelty will burn off, he told her one free period as they sat in the arboretum. Artificial sunlight poured through the transparent dome above, refracting into rainbow shards across her crystalline body and the leaves around them. People will get used to you. Then you'll just be another stressed cadet worrying about grades. I'm not entirely certain that is comforting, she said dryly. He nudged her shoulder with his. The human gesture of casual closeness still surprised her. Hey, even if everyone else gets bored and moves on, you're stuck with me. That's a promise. A warm ripple echoed through her core. Your friendship was unexpected, she admitted, but it has been very welcome. Unexpected because I'm human? He teased. Partially, she said. Our people have minimal direct contact. The Coalition files describe humans as impulsive, emotionally volatile, often disruptive to protocol. So basically, we're the problem children of the galaxy, Tyler said, grinning. Accurate. Luminars tend toward long deliberation and consensus, Mila said. Humans tend toward kicking doors down, he supplied, metaphorically and literally. Her crest shimmered in amusement. Your approach baffles many elder species. But not you, he asked quietly. She thought about it, watching beams of light slide along the dome. It unsettles me, she said honestly. Yet, I also find it fascinating. You act while others are still drafting subcommittees. And if I hadn't, he asked, you'd still be in that basement. She didn't answer. They both knew the truth. The ship's normal background hum suddenly cut with a sharp alarm. Red lights strobed through the arboretum, washing the plants in emergency crimson. Attention all personnel, boomed the calm, synthesized voice over the intercom. Security breach detected. Hostile forces have boarded the Nexus. All cadets report to designated shelter zones. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Tyler was on his feet in an instant, all joking stripped away. That's the invasion protocol, he said, reaching down to haul Mila up. Shelter Zone C for this sector. Come on. Mila's outer layer hardened so fast it made a faint cracking sound, facets sharpening into armor. Who would assault a Coalition flagship? She asked, falling in a step beside him as they sprinted for the exit. The peace accords have held for generations. I don't know, Tyler said. We'll figure it out later. Right now we move. The corridors outside were packed with cadets and staff moving in orderly lines. The Coalition drilled for emergencies obsessively. Even in fear, people followed the illuminated strips on the floor, heading for their assigned shelters. As they approached a junction, a shudder ran through the deck plates. The lights dimmed, flared, then dropped to emergency level, leaving everything bathed in red gloom. That came from high up, Tyler said grimly. Bridge level, maybe. The intercom crackled. A new voice cut through the static, raw, guttural, and dripping cruelty. Even without translation, the hatred was obvious. Attention, Coalition weaklings, it hissed. Your ship belongs to the Draconian Imperium. Your command crew lies dead. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift. Resist, and you will suffer. A cold vibration ran through Mila's crystal lattice. She'd seen archived footage of Draconian raids, armored reptilian soldiers, burning colonies, enslaved populations shipped to brutal mining worlds. The Draconian Imperium should be confined to the rim sectors, she whispered. How did they breach the inner defense ring? Question for the Defense Council, Tyler said, steering her through the crowd. After we're not in a combat zone. Up ahead, Lieutenant Commander Vex stood at the junction, her sleek feline form radiating tension as she directed cadets towards Shelter Zone C. This way, she called, her tail lashing. Move, cadets, move. No pushing, no screaming. You've practiced this. Tyler and Mila joined the flow. Before they could reach the shelter entrance, another blast slammed the ship, closer this time. The floor lurched under their feet. Targeting the power grid, Vex muttered, trying to blind us and kill our defenses. What about the response fleet? Tyler called. Someone has to have noticed we're under fire. Comms are down, Vex replied. Her ears flattened. Until we get them back, we're on our own. Now move into. The staccato whine of energy weapons echoed from a side corridor, followed by screams and the sharp, sizzling hiss of unfamiliar rifles. Vex's eyes widened. They're already in this section, she said, voice dropping. Change of plan. Lecture Hall 7. Now. She shoved open a nearby door and herded a cluster of cadets inside. Mila and Tyler were swept along. Lecture Hall 7 was a tiered classroom with banks of consoles and seats for over 100 students. Around 30 cadets tumbled in with them, plus a few instructors. Vex slapped the door panel. Thick shutters slammed down over doors and wall screens. These rooms are secondary shelter zones, she explained quickly. Not as robust as the primaries, but they'll slow the enemy. For how long? An Arcteron cadet asked, eye stalks trembling. Long enough for security to regroup, Vex said. Our job is to stay put and stay alive. Tyler scanned the room automatically, mapping entry points, blind spots, improvised cover. Mila watched him, understanding now that his 2 years of human defense training weren't just bragging. You have combat experience, she said quietly. Border peacekeeping, he replied without looking at her. Nothing like this. But basics are basics. If they breach, we treat this like a choke point. Before she could ask more, a deafening impact rattled the sealed main door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Some cadets cried out. Everyone back, Vex ordered, drawing her sidearm, a coalition neural disruptor. Get behind the tiers and stay low. Another slam. The door bowed inward. A third and metal groan bending. Mila's inner heart node vibrated painfully, her whole body humming with fear. What do the Draconians want with a single ship? She whispered to Tyler. Draconians want everything, he said shortly. Territory, resources, slaves. The last word hit hard. Luminar components, shards of living crystal, sold for obscene prices on illegal markets. She'd seen the reports, pushed aside as old history. A fourth impact smashed the door in. The reinforced panel tore free and crashed to the floor. 3 Draconian soldiers strode through the gap. Tall reptilian figures armored in black metal, helmets bristling with sensor arrays. Their scaled jaws were full of knife-like teeth. A neural probe extended from each helmet like a gleaming antenna. Scan for life, the leader hissed. The probe on his helmet pulsed faintly as it swept the room. His gaze landed on Mila and froze. The vertical pupils narrowed. A Luminar, he crooned. The Imperator will be pleased. Vex didn't give him time to gloat. She fired, the neural disruptor's blue flare slamming into his chest. He staggered, but didn't fall. His armor absorbed most of the blast. Resistance, he snarled. How predictable. He pulled the trigger on his own weapon. A lance of searing energy hit Vex squarely, hurling her backwards. She slammed into the wall and crumpled, unmoving. Cadets screamed. The other 2 Draconians surged into the room, weapons raised. The leader began barking orders in harsh Draconian. Soft flesh together, he commanded, gesturing with his rifle. Stronger species there. Luminar with me. One of his soldiers stalked toward the tier where Tyler and Mila crouched. He leveled his rifle at them. Out, he hissed. Now. Tyler rose slowly, positioning himself between the rifle and Mila. She could feel the coiled energy in him, like potential before a lightning strike. The human goes with the others, the leader said, pointing with his clawed hand. The Luminar comes to me. We stay together, Tyler said. The Draconian's laugh was a low, venomous hiss. You misunderstand, human. This is not a choice. Move or die. Tyler didn't move. If you want her, he said, you go through me. The Draconian's slit pupils narrowed. So be it. Everything that happened next came in flashes. Tyler exploded into motion, far faster than his casual demeanor had ever hinted. Instead of reaching for the rifle barrel, he lunged for the slender neural probe jutting from the Draconian's helmet. His fingers clamped around it and wrenched. The probe tore free in a shower of sparks. The Draconian screamed as the sudden break overloaded his neural link. He staggered, disoriented. Tyler flipped the sparking probe's grip and rammed it into the small joint between neck armor and helmet. A cascade of energy arced along the suit's systems, never meant to handle feedback at that intensity. The Draconian convulsed, armor flickering with overload, then collapsed in a smoking heap. The other two spun toward Tyler, weapons swinging up, too slow. 3 Forian cadets dropped from the ceiling. They'd used their natural climbing claws to cling to the overhead structure, unseen. Now they landed on the Draconian's shoulders and necks, driving talons into the same vulnerable joint Tyler had exploited. At the same time, a pair of Arcturon cadets, eyes glowing with concentration, yanked the soldiers' rifles out of their hands with a burst of telekinesis. The guns skidded across the floor. The fight was short and brutal. The Draconians, stripped of their ranged advantage and disoriented by neural disruption, were overwhelmed by the supposedly soft cadets they dismissed. Within minutes, all 3 invaders lay unconscious or incapacitated on the lecture hall floor. Tyler stood over the first one, chest heaving. He wiped sweat from his brow with a shaky hand and looked up at Mila. "Told you we'd be okay," he said. That was... Her translator scrambled to find terms strong enough. "You targeted their neural interfaces." "How did you know?" "Standard Coalition briefing on Draconian armor," he replied, already moving to kneel by Vex. "Those helmet probes are powerful, but fragile. Overload the link, and the whole system freaks out." Vex was alive, but badly injured, breath shallow and uneven. "We have to get her to medical," Tyler said. "And we need to warn the rest of the ship about the neural probe weakness." "Comms are still dark," said a meaner cadet by the wall panel, frustration in his voice. "And those corridors are probably crawling with more of them." "Then we use another route," Tyler said, eyes sharpening. He turned to Mila. "You can help with that." She blinked. "I do not understand." "Your people communicate through energy pulses and crystalline networks, right?" he said. "Long distance, signaling through the ground on your homeworld." "Yes, but..." Her crest rippled with alarm. "The Nexus doesn't have a Luminar resonance grid. And even if it did, the range is limited." "We don't need a dedicated network," Tyler said, the outline of a dangerous idea forming on his face. "We got a ship-wide power grid. If you could push a coded pulse into the main distribution node." "You are suggesting I interface directly with the core power conduit," she said slowly. "As a living transmitter." "Exactly," he said. "One message, repeated. Short and simple. Hit the neural probes. Crash their armor." Mila's entire body hummed with fear. No Luminar has ever attempted to channel that scale of energy alone. "The overload could shatter my matrix." "I know," Tyler said. For once, there was no glibness in his voice. "I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. But you're the only one aboard who can send a signal to every deck at once without comms." The room fell quiet. Every cadet was watching her. Arcturans, Forians, Valyrians, Meaner, Phalasians, each pair of eyes a tiny weight on her decision. "What exactly would I transmit?" she asked finally. "A simple manual override," he said. "Target the neural probes. Disrupt the armor." "That's it." She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the faint hum of the ship through the floor. "I will need access to the power distribution node, and protection during the process." "You'll have it," Tyler said, turning toward the others. "Who's coming?" Hands paused, tentacles, claws shot up. In that moment, the alien girl who ate alone in the basement found herself at the center of a multi-species uprising, and a human who had broken down one unfair door was about to help her kick open a much bigger one. They moved fast. The Forian cadets went first, vanishing into the ceiling gratings and ventilation shafts. Their job was to scout and report back through whispered comms and knocks on pipes, relaying which halls were clear and which swarmed with Draconians. The Valyrian cadets, heavier, stronger, improvised a stretcher for Vex from 2 benches and a torn-off panel. They carried her between them as gently as possible, refusing to leave her behind. Arcturan stayed near the middle of the group, ready to yank weapons away or slam doors shut with a burst of telekinesis. The rest armed themselves with captured draconian rifles, neural disruptors, and anything else that could serve as a weapon. Mila walked near the center, protected on all sides. Tyler stayed at her right shoulder, eyes constantly scanning, one hand wrapped around a rifle he clearly knew how to use. Twice they ran into draconian patrols. Twice they hit first. The first time, a trio of boarders stepped into a supposedly empty junction and found themselves instantly blinded by a directed flashlight glare, their probes overloaded by a focused light pulse. Before they could recover, telekinetic force ripped their rifles away, and a Valyrian cadet plowed into them like a freight shuttle. The second time, the Draconians did manage to fire. A meaner cadet went down with a cry. Another threw themselves over him, shielding him with their own body until the Draconians were neutralized. By the time the group reached the engineering section, their numbers had dropped from 30 to 18. Some had stayed behind to guard the injured. Others had fallen. The power distribution node was a cavernous chamber near the heart of the ship. A massive glowing core dominated the space, sending pulsing streams of blue-white energy through thick conduits that branched throughout the Nexus. Under normal circumstances, teams of engineers would be monitoring readouts and adjusting flow. Now the room was eerily quiet, consoles smeared with scorch marks, a few bodies in engineer uniforms lying still near the walls. "The Draconians have already been through here," Tyler said grimly. "But they left the core intact. They need power too." A Phalasian cadet with silver scales and quick fingers darted to the main control console. "I've done advanced engineering modules," he said. "I can reroute power to open a safe interface point, but it'll trigger all kinds of alarms. Then the Draconians will know someone's messing with their power," Tyler said. "We'll just have to hold as long as we can." Mila stepped closer to the core. The energy made her entire structure vibrate, like a song too loud for the air around it. "I will need direct contact with the primary conduit," she said. "Not the outer branches. They leak too much." The Phalasian worked fast, claws flying over controls. A section of plating slid aside, revealing a thick tube of pure energy, brighter and more focused than any Luminar resonance channel she'd ever seen. "Warning," the console chimed calmly. "Exposure to primary conduit is lethal to most biological species." "Not us," Mila murmured. "We are born of light and crystal." She turned to Tyler. Under the glow of the core, his features were stark, every worry line visible. "If this goes wrong," she said, "there may not be anything left of me to regenerate." "Then it doesn't go wrong," he said firmly. "I'll pull you out if you push it too far. I swear." She placed a cool hand on his wrist for a heartbeat. "We adapt, we overcome," she said. "Is that not the human phrase?" "That's close enough," he said with a quick, tight smile. "Let's save the ship." She faced the exposed conduit. Her outer shell began to soften, not just in one hand, but across her entire body. Light from the core poured into her, refracted, intensified. She felt her edges blur, her form becoming less solid, more fluid energy trapped in a crystal lattice that was no longer strong enough to contain it. Then she pressed both palms to the conduit. Raw power hit her like a tidal wave. For a dizzying moment, her consciousness scattered, every atom lit up with more energy than it was meant to hold. She felt the shape of the ship itself, decks, corridors, systems, outlined in the flow. "Mila," Tyler shouted from somewhere far away. "Stay with me." She clung to his voice like an anchor. She forced the screaming flood of energy into patterns, compressing it into pulses, on-off, the way Luminar beacons signaled across crystalline planes. "Target neural probes," she gasped. Each word she spoke became a coded surge of power that raced down the ship's arteries, riding the grid into lights, panels, and auxiliary circuits. "Disrupt armor systems." Across the Nexus, light fixtures flickered in a deliberate rhythm. Engineers, security officers, and even cadets who'd paid attention in systems class recognized the pattern immediately. It wasn't random. It was a message. She repeated it again, and again, and again. Her entire body screamed. Her crystal matrix vibrated at frequencies that made cracks shimmer at the edges of her vision. She felt herself thinning, edges dissolving into light. At some point, seconds? Minutes? The rhythm of battle, noises reached the edge of her awareness. Shouts. Weapons fire. Draconian roars closer than they should have been. The door to the power node slammed open. Draconians stormed into the chamber. Hold them, Tyler yelled. She needs more time. Rifle blasts whined. Telekinetic ripples shuddered the air. A Valyrian roared as he tackled a Draconian away from the core. A Forian shrieked in pain and rage as she fired a stolen rifle point-blank. Mila couldn't spare any processing space for it. All she could do was keep sending the pattern. Target the probes. Break their armor. Turn their strength into their weakness. Her form was barely cohesive now, a figure of blinding blue-white light barely sketched in crystal lines. Her inner voice grew distant, words slurring. Then hands closed around her shoulders. Mila, that's enough. Tyler's voice cut through the noise like a laser. They've got it. Everyone's hitting the probes now. You have to let go. She tried to pull away. The conduit clung to her, energy refusing to release its new channel. Tyler wrapped his arms around her from behind and dragged. The separation felt like tearing herself away from a part of her own body. A soundless scream of energy ripped through her. The connection snapped. She collapsed backwards into Tyler's arms. Did it work? She whispered. Her voice sounded wrong, distorted even to her. It worked, he said, voice thick with relief. Security teams are reporting Draconians dropping all over the ship. Their armors glitching and locking up. They're falling back. Good, she whispered. Her vision tunneled, the bright core shrinking to a pinprick. Then there was nothing. The soft, steady thrum of a medbay Regan chamber greeted her return to awareness. Mila surfaced like someone rising through layers of liquid crystal. She blinked, her vision resolving into a ceiling of white panels and a familiar human face leaning over her. Hey, Tyler said, a grin breaking through the obvious relief in his eyes. Welcome back to the world of the not vaporized. How long? She asked, her voice still carrying a faint echo, like it was bouncing around inside a crystal cave. About 6 hours, he said. Docs had a mild panic attack, trying to figure out how to treat a half-melted Luminar, but they got there. She tried to sit up and was surprised when her body obeyed. Her outer layer had fully recrystallized, though it felt more transparent than before, like freshly grown crystal that hadn't fully settled. Before she could ask more, another familiar figure entered the med bay, Principal Lurik, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. His silver scales were dimmed, and a few showed fresh scars. Cadet Xerex, he said softly, it is very good to see you awake. How bad was it? Tyler asked, the joking tone gone. Lurik's expression sobered. We lost 27 crew, including most of the senior bridge officers. 42 more injured, but it could have been much worse. Without your actions, he shook his head, we might be drifting under Draconian control right now, en route to their territory. The message reached the whole ship? Mila asked. The pulses? Perfectly, Lurik said. Every segment of the grid received the same pattern. Once security forces understood what you were telling them, they started targeting the neural probes. Draconian suits began to fail across the Nexus. Between that and the cadet uprisings, the invaders lost control of the situation quickly. He gave them both a look that was equal parts pride and gratitude. We've re-established contact with the Coalition response fleet. They'll be here within the hour to escort us back to safe space. He hesitated, then continued. The acting captain would like to speak with both of you. When you're steady enough to walk. Mila swung her legs over the side of the Regan unit. She half expected them to shatter. They held. I'm operational, she said. Mostly. Tyler offered his arm. She took it. They followed Lurik through corridors that bore the scars of recent battle. Scorch marks on bulkheads, patched over breaches, portable med stations set up in nooks. Crew members and cadets moved with weary purpose, stepping around repair teams, pausing briefly when they recognized Mila or Tyler before hurrying on. News travels fast on a ship, Tyler muttered under his breath. Apparently, we're famous now. Not my preferred outcome, Mila replied, though a quiet part of her warmed at the nods of respect aimed their way. On the command deck, the usual polished calm had been replaced by organized chaos. Junior officers manned consoles, usually reserved for captains and admirals. Status reports flew in overlapping streams. Acting Captain Threll, an Arcturon with calm, intelligent eyes, turned as they entered. Cadet Xerex. Cadet Grant, she said. Thank you for coming. She brought up a schematic of the ship's power network on the main display. Pulsing lines traced the paths the energy and Mila's message had taken. Our engineering teams have been analyzing what you did, Threll said, channeling data through the power grid via crystalline interface. It's unprecedented. It was reckless, Mila said quietly. My structure nearly destabilized. We have no intention of repeating the exact circumstances, Threll said. But the underlying principle is powerful. Conventional comms can be jammed, but a secondary, crystal-based signaling network running through the power grid, that's much harder to block. She pointed at the schematic. We'd like your input, Cadet Xerex, in developing a safer version. A distributed resonance network integrated into ship systems. You have an intuitive grasp of this our engineers lack. I'm a first-year cadet, Mila protested weakly. You're also the only being aboard who has done what our engineers said was impossible, Threll replied. We are not asking you to design alone. We are asking you to teach us how to think about energy the way Luminars do. She turned to Tyler. As for you, Cadet Grant, your decision to target the neural probes and your coordination of the cadet resistance have been noted by more than just this ship. The Defense Council has requested a tactical debrief from you when we reach port. Tyler looked genuinely stunned. Ma'am, I just remembered a briefing and got lucky in a fight. Luck favors those who move, Threll said, and those who kick down the right doors. She studied them both. The coalition was founded on the belief that we are stronger together than apart. Today, a human and a Luminar proved that in a way no committee resolution could. Whatever commendations follow, know that this ship still exists because you refuse to accept the roles you were quietly assigned. After the meeting, as they walked back toward the academy sections, Tyler stopped at a viewport. Outside, points of light were coalescing, coalition ships dropping out of FTL, arraying in protective formation around the Nexus. You know, he said, leaning against a transparent panel, when I decided to bust down a basement door, I thought the worst that would happen is detention. Not all this. The human approach, Mila said, standing beside him. Act first. Consider protocols later. Sometimes that blows up in our faces, he said. Sometimes it turns out pretty okay. Sometimes, she finished for him, it saves a ship. He turned to face her fully. I was going to say, sometimes it leads to unexpected friendships. The ship thing is a nice bonus. Her crystal form shimmered with a soft, chiming laugh. A cautious Luminar and an impulsive human, she said. Coalition cultural analysts will be delighted. Let them write papers, he said. We'll be busy helping design new comm systems and giving terrifying debriefs. And eating meals together, she added, in the main cafeteria? Yet, he said, definitely that. No more basements. Outside, the rescue fleet's lights grew brighter, like stars drifting closer. Mila watched them and thought about everything that had started with one simple act. A human deciding that a locked door was unacceptable. On her homeworld, massive crystal formations grew from the smallest alignments, one molecule, then another, then millions. Energy flows began with a single pulse. Maybe the biggest changes in the galaxy started the same way, with one person refusing to look away. In the days that followed, a new normal settled over the Nexus. Repairs turned gaping wounds and bulkheads into patched scars. The memorial service for the lost crew drew everyone who could stand, filling the main hangar with a sea of species united in shared grief. The names of the fallen echoed through the space, translated into dozens of languages and harmonics. The Academy resumed classes, but nothing went back exactly to how it had been. Combat training became mandatory for all cadets, not just those on tactical tracks. Mixed species teams became the default for exercises. The phrase cadet uprising began circulating with a mix of pride and disbelief. Mila's schedule grew crowded. Regular coursework filled her mornings. Afternoons and some evenings, she reported to engineering labs, where teams of specialists worked with her to shape the first prototypes of what they called the crystalline secondary comm grid. Her role wasn't to handle the math. That was the engineer's strength. Her job was to explain things Luminars rarely put into words. How resonance felt when it was stable versus when it wanted to fracture. How energy liked to flow through crystal. What subtle changes in tone meant in a Luminar network. Tyler's days changed too. He found himself dragged into strategic seminars he hadn't signed up for, standing at the front of rooms full of officers to detail exactly how he'd read the draconian movement patterns and where he saw flaws in standard coalition doctrine. Despite the extra demands, they made a point of sharing at least one meal a day. Their table in the cafeteria grew into a regular gathering spot for an odd assortment of cadets. The Forians from the lecture hall, the Arcturon telekinetics, a meaner engineer, even a quiet Phalasian who'd helped reroute the power node. I still think it's wild they're rolling out the crystal comm system fleet-wide, Tyler said one evening, balancing a tray loaded with too much food. That's record speed for a bureaucratic machine. The engineers named the protocol after us, Mila said, her crest flickering with mixed embarrassment and pride. The Xerex Grant Grid. Sounds fancy, he said. Also wildly unfair. It should just be the Xerex Grid. I didn't nearly burn myself out on a power conduit. You nearly tore me away from it too late, she corrected. We share the name. Before they could continue the argument, a familiar hulking silhouette appeared at the end of the table. Vice Principal Drav approached, walking with a slight limp and a bandage hidden beneath his uniform. His 6 eyes looked less hard than usual, his lower hands fidgeting. Cadet Xerex. Cadet Grant, he said stiffly. May I intrude? You may join us, Mila said. He didn't sit. I wish to inform you personally, he said, that the administrative board has voted to overhaul our species-specific accommodation policies. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Meaning no more for your privacy basement bands? Drav's mottled skin darkened. Yes, he said. Exactly that. We will no longer isolate cadets based on biology or culture. Instead, we will present multi-species education on feeding processes, grooming customs, and other differences. We will ask before we accommodate. He turned to Mila fully. I also owe you a personal apology. I enforced a policy that violated both the Coalition Charter and your dignity. I allowed fear and convenience to override principle. He swallowed, visibly uncomfortable. I am sorry, Cadet Xerex. Mila's crest rippled with a complex pattern of surprise, relief, and something like forgiveness. Thank you for acknowledging it, she said. I accept your apology, and I appreciate the change. Drav nodded once. Your actions during the attack forced many of us to re-evaluate our assumptions about who needs protection and who provides it. The official commendations will be announced tomorrow, but I thought you should hear this part from me. He left as awkwardly as he'd arrived. Well, Tyler said after a moment, if that's not character development, I don't know what is. The Draconians forced more change than they intended, Mila said. Systems, policies, and perspectives. Tyler reached out and laced his fingers through hers on the tabletop. The gesture, now familiar enough that it no longer sent her translation matrix into overdrive. No more basements, he said quietly. No more basements, she agreed. Only doors. Open ones. That night, as Mila eased into her regeneration cycle, she lay on her bunk and watched tiny reflections from the cabin lights play across her hands. The room hummed with the gentle vibration of a starship alive and healing. She thought about the girl who had once sat alone in a locked storage room, told it was for her comfort. She thought about the human who had decided comfort was a poor excuse for injustice. Her consciousness slid into Luminar resonance sleep, half dream, half meditation. Threads of thought drifted across the network of memory she carried within herself. Images rose. A broken door, a circle of cadets watching in awe as she ate, a power conduit blazing as she became a beacon, a hand reaching for hers in a crowded cafeteria. Sometimes, she realized, it took someone outside your culture to point out the cracks you'd accepted as normal. Sometimes it took a species infamous for ignoring protocol to fix a rule everyone else had convinced themselves they had to follow. Sometimes it took a human. And that's the end of this story, for now, the narrator's voice would say in your video. If you listen all the way here, don't forget to drop your feedback in the comments, good or bad. It helps us improve the stories. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll leave another video on screen that I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy. Big hug, and see you in the next one.